So today we are going to prep this wainscoting we just did in preparation for painting. In order to get a professional looking job, prep is key. So the first thing we are going to do is inspect our trim work. So Jordi is a pretty good Finnish carpenter, and I know he glued all his seams, so that's good. So when you press on it, there is no movement. So inspect everything, put your hand on it, make sure you have no nails sticking out. So it looks pretty good. So we are going to inspect the whole wall this way. Then if we see stuff out of the ordinary, like a nail sticking out or a piece of trim loose, we are going to make the adjustments needed. See here, we have a nail sticking out. So we need to address that right away. Alright, so that's it. Everything is looking good except that nail, so we're going to take care of that nail. First step is I'm going to vacuum everything because I like to work in a clean environment. I want to take all the dust out. I want to start with a clean step. Okay, so I vacuumed everything. I just want to point out one thing. We already had the area prepped. You have plastic wall behind, paper on the floor, so we are good to go. I just want you guys to make sure that you prep everything first, because when you start puttying, sanding, you're going to have a mess everywhere. So here, if you look at the nail, it's not like the nail is just sticking out. So we are going to cut the nail, pliers. Okay, and now we need the nail punch and push it in. Always use your finger to feel. Perfect. And just check, visually check everything. See, like for example this is not good right here. This is going to show that's extra glue from the batten. We need to cut that piece of glue off, because if you don't do that when you spray, you're going to see it. Jordi, always prepared. No razor knife.
You got the razor knife, beautiful. Right.
Wow. Preppé.
Preppé le pieu. Because you're the king of the prep.
See guys, all nice and clean. It's very important to always put your fingers on the nail holes and seams, because sometimes you can't see it, but once you spray it, you will see everything. Alright, we are good here. Now the next step, use a putty knife, and I use that vinyl spackling paste. It dries pretty quickly. It's a good product. I get that at my local painting store. It's a water cleanup. So what you do is you take a little bit on your putty knife and you go over all the nail holes and all the seams. See those seams right here? You want to cover those seams with putty. This way, when you sand it, after this you won't see the seam anymore, and when you spray it, it will come out perfect. So it's, see, like right now I can feel this nail. And you go ahead and you putty everything. So you go ahead and putty the seam. This is the most important part of a painting job. Prep is everything on a painting job. So just take your time. It's not a race. Okay guys, so while I am puttying all the panels, Jordi is doing the caulking. You caulk between the batten and the wall, or between different wood surfaces. As you can tell, he's using a wet rag to wipe his fingers. Always keep his fingers clean. And you can see on the video how nice it's going to be, so you won't see any seams. This way, when we come back the next day to sand everything, we are going to inspect everything again, making sure we didn't forget any holes or any cracks, and then we're going to be ready for spraying the paint. So I puttied most of the seams, most of the holes. Now I'm going to look at it one more time in detail, making sure I didn't forget anything. So what I'm doing now is the putty starts to dry. I'm using the same putty knife and I go over my patches to wipe the excess off. This way, when I sand tomorrow, it makes my life much easier. I don't have big chunks of putty to sand. Just run it over like this and knock off all the extra putties. Okay guys, so now it's caulking time. So we use this caulking, it's a fast dry caulking. You don't have to use fast dry. What I do is I take a razor knife and I cut a small hole like this at an angle. And the reason why I do an angle is because when I go and use my caulking, I can have my angle like this, follow the line. And it will make sense when I start doing it. Always have a clean rag, a wet, clean rag. At the end of the job, I should have no caulking on my hands. Please, I'm going to do one panel at a time. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe it. Remember, you have a wet rag. This is why it's very important to make the hole of the caulking gun not too big. This way you don't have that much excess. Clean your rag in between. That's what you don't want to see. Something like this, that's not good. So make sure you wipe it nice. Keep in mind, everything you see now, you're going to see it even more when it's painted. Especially if you use a dark color. It shows all the defects. So I know now the black trim and charcoal color are very popular and I like it. The problem is, like I said, everything shows. There you go, we are looking good here. So we puttied the wall, we caulked it, I checked everything. Tomorrow we are going to come back, we are going to sand all the putty, we are going to dust off, vacuum everything, we are going to prep all the floor very tight with a new tape, a new piece of flooring, and then our wall will be ready for spraying. And we are going to spray primer first. When we spray the primer, we can triple check our prep, sand again. And then once the primer is done and checked and sanded, we can shoot the final top coats.
2,000 years later.
All right, good morning, guys. We're back over here at our wainscoting accent wall. We've done all of our prep. We puttied all of our seams. We caulked all of our gaps, closed everything up. Now we're going to come back and we're going to sand through everything so that we can get our surface nice and clean. We're going to prep the area. So we'll put tape down, close up any gaps. We're going to sand all the moldings. Then we're going to set up the pump. We're going to show you how we set up a pump for a spray application. You can brush and roll this like we were saying, but it's just not as high quality of a finish. So if you can and you feel comfortable doing it, it's definitely worth it to go the extra mile with the pump and spray your trim. It's going to look amazing. So right now what I'm doing is we've got paper already down. I just pulled off the old tape. I'm making a new fresh tape line so that when I do spray my molding, I make sure to follow the surface tight with the tape so that when I peel that off, I've got a very crisp, straight, clean line. Good idea to have like an old paintbrush with you. We use it as like a little dust brush. You can get all the little particulates out of there, sweep that stuff out of the way. So, just take my time, nice and tight following the molding. This is my new spray line. When I take out my pump and I spray this, you'll see when I pull the tape off, it's going to be a perfectly straight, very clean, tight line. Just make sure, go the extra mile. Prep takes a little bit of time, but not too much. And just make sure you do a really good job covering your floor. You don't want to clean up paint later, that sucks. It's easier to put down tape and paper now than it is to scrub wet paint or paint that's dried off of a finished surface that you don't want it on. So while Tyler keeps going on the prep, I'm gonna take you over. I'm gonna grab a orbital sander. I like to use the orbital, it's battery powered, it's quick. I've got a flat surface. I've got a 220 grit sandpaper on here. I'm gonna come over all of our old seams that we puttied. I'm gonna sand them nice and smooth to the touch. I mean, you can kind of be the judge of what's considered quality to you. We'll dust everything off, and then I'll show you how we set up the sprayer, and we'll get this sprayed with primer. All right, guys, I'm coming back through now that I'm done sanding the big surfaces. I'm just taking a smaller piece of sandpaper and I'm hitting all the spots that are hard to reach, the spots that the orbital sander won't get. Sides of molding, the little pieces here where it's a little bit more detail. I just need to give it a quick hand sand. Can knock everything down, make sure my surface is nice and smooth everywhere, and then I'll dust this off and get ready to start spraying. Remember too, it's always a good idea when you're doing this, it gets pretty dusty and can be kind of messy. Wear a dust mask. All right, rad. So we're all done with our sanding. We went back through, we double checked all our putty holes, sanded all our seams, everything's nice and tight. We're gonna come through now with our vacuum and our dust brush. We're gonna get all the dust off of the surface, get this thing ready to start spraying. Alrighty, we're sanded, we're dusted off, we're all clean. Now our surface is ready for us to come back through and do our final prep. I've got a tape machine, I'm gonna have tape, same thing, dust brush. I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna put a nice clean piece of paper along the bottom. Anywhere that I don't want paint, I'm gonna use this tape machine and I'm gonna make my life easy and cover those areas. So I'm gonna start prepping and then at the end we'll show you what it looks like. So same as the bottom, I'm gonna take my tape, line it up with the molding, and I'm gonna put a nice straight tape line with a single layer of tape. This is gonna make my job easier when I come back through and paper. The paper's a little bit harder to manipulate. A roll of tape is $6. The extra effort is priceless. So do yourself a favor, tape a nice straight line with a single piece of tape, come back through, close up all your prep with paper, and then you will be ready to spray. All right, so here it is. This is what your finished product should look like. You want paper, tape, anywhere that you don't want paint. Again, anywhere that you don't want paint. Above and beyond is the name of the game. We've closed off the top and bottom of our moldings. Basically, we made a little picture frame. Painting's artwork. Make a picture out of your surface. Now that when I come through with the sprayer, I know that I'm only gonna get paint where I want it. The next steps are gonna be priming. Once we're done priming, we'll let that paint dry. We're gonna go back through. This step is kind of discretionary for like a high quality finish. If you're a little bit of a perfectionist, prime it, walk back over your surface, take a look at all your seams, take a look at your nail holes, all that stuff. If there's anything that you don't like, now is the time to fill those holes with some more spackle, let that dry, give it a quick little sand, and then you can spot prime after. So what we'll do is we'll set up the pump. We're gonna use the primer on the entire surface. We like to use this because if you'll notice, we've got a pre-primed material and then we have a raw material. If you go straight over this raw material with a latex paint, this color is gonna end up bleeding through. You're gonna waste your time doing a whole bunch of coats of paint. It might not stick as well. There's a lot of problems that can happen with that. So what you wanna do is set up with some primer, spray the whole surface with primer. You'll seal all this stuff out. It'll give you the opportunity to come back through and look for imperfections. When you find those imperfections, you can correct them, and then we'll spot prime them, and then we'll be ready for the finish coat or the top coat. If we're doing a color, if it's white, if it's black, if it's blue, that's when we start putting the colors in. We do the top coat of paint, 2 coats of paint, pull the prep, and you're good to go. So before we get started, I want to take you guys on a quick walkthrough on an airless sprayer. We use these for latex paints. A few of the things that you're gonna need: a can opener to open up your paint can. You're gonna want a 5-gallon bucket, fill it about halfway with water. It's always good to have water around paint. And then let me walk you through the pump. So the components of the airless sprayer, the gun, as we call it itself, this is where the paint's actually gonna come out of. We've got the trigger, we've got the tips. You can cycle out different tips for different style trim. We're gonna be using a 310 tip sprayer today. Those numbers correlate to the volume of paint and the width and span of the spray coverage. If you're not gonna do it all the time, 310 is probably plenty, 310, 315, something like that. Just consult at your local paint store. They'll even point you in the right direction depending on what application you're using the sprayer for. We've got the hose. This is where the paint travels through. And then we have the sprayer itself. So on the sprayer, there's a few controls. There's the power switch, on, off. There's the pressure control, so this will control the volume or the pressure that the paint is actually sprayed with. When we set it up and I have paint in the gun, I'm gonna show you why that's important. And then on this side, it's like a release or a bleeder valve. So we use this to charge the paint as well as release pressure if there's a malfunction, something. I mean, that's a whole nother story. What we'll do first is we take the feed or the siphon. We're gonna set that siphon tube into our paint. We can just use the gallon. We'll stick that in towards the bottom of the bucket. We're going to run out our hose. So I'll run out our hose so it's nice and straight. We know that we're not gonna have any kinks in it. And then once we do that, we'll turn this on. I'll charge up the sprayer for you. I'll show you how we do that. And then we'll set the spray pressure so that we're getting a good consistent spray pattern. And then we're gonna spray this molding. All right, so the first step, now that we've rolled our line out, you can see that there's no slack, there's no kinks. We know that our sprayer is gonna be good to go. We're gonna remove the tip from the pistol. You just pull that out. Slides in and out. When there's no pressure in the gun, it's very easy. When this is pressurized, you won't be able to pull the tip out, and you'll know why, because if you do, you're gonna throw paint everywhere. So this tip, we pull that out. We're gonna set that to the side for right now. We're gonna go ahead and turn on our pump. We're gonna set the bleeder until we see paint come out of our line. And then we're gonna switch over to the pistol and we're gonna do the same thing. Now the pump is actually filling with paint. You can see in a second, we should be pushing a little bit of paint through here. Now you can see that that's paint. So as you'll see, now this line is fully under pressure. We've engaged the pump and the overspray. The line is full of pressure. What the painters are gonna do though, when you pick up the sprayer, unless it's brand new, this line is charged with water. It's not full of paint. So the next step, we're gonna have to repeat the process and take the water out of the pistol so that we know that we're spraying paint. There's a couple of things to take into consideration when you do that. This thing's under a lot of pressure. If I pull the trigger right now, it's gonna make a big mess everywhere. This is where my bucket of water comes into play. I'm gonna turn the siphon back on. I'm gonna let some of the pressure out of the line because it's gonna open it up. When I do that, I'm gonna engage the trigger on my pistol, point it into the bucket of water, and then I'm going to switch the feed so that now the pump is pulling paint and it's supplying the line of the air hose. So what you're gonna see happen is you're gonna see water trickle out, and then you're gonna see water pressurized coming out, but I've taken the initial recoil out of it, so it's a controllable stream. When I see that water turn to paint, I know that I'm ready to go. I'm gonna put my spray tip in, and then I'm gonna adjust the pressure to make sure that my pattern's good for the application that I'm using. Let the pressure out of the line. Keep this underwater, same thing, it's under pressure. If you stick this underwater, it's much more controllable than the pistol. So we're gonna keep this underwater. We've let off the pressure. I'm pulling the trigger. As you can see, the water is coming out of the line. Nothing's no longer coming out of this siphon. So the pressure is pushing all the water out of the line. Pretty soon you will see some paint. Longer hose, give it a 10, 15 seconds maybe. Know you're doing the right thing if water is still coming out. As you can see, it's starting to turn itself to paint. I spray it on the side of the bucket. It's watery paint. Now it's paint. I let my finger off the trigger. My gun is now pressurized and primed and ready to go with the paint, whether it's primer or whether it's paint. I'm gonna install my tip. It's important to note there's two directions. You've got the arrow, that notates the spray direction. You always want that arrow pointed forward when you're getting ready to spray. So I'm gonna insert that spray tip. As you can see, it's pivotable. Make sure that arrow is forward. If it's backwards, sometimes you'll get a clog or a thick piece of paint that gets stuck in your spray tip. This is to blow out or clean the system. So you're reversing it basically. So what we'll do now is we've got it set like this. Now I'm gonna be spraying a fan pattern. So this pattern, depending on the pressure, right, on the side of my pump, I'm gonna sample my spray pattern. I'm gonna try and do it on a surface, whether it's on my prep. I've got a scrap piece of wood outside. I'm gonna go outside. I'm going to spray on that piece of wood. I'm gonna make sure that my spray pattern's how I want it. And then when I come in, I am ready to go. I can start spraying this molding. So if my pressure's too low on the sprayer, I purposely dialed it down so I can show you guys. You're gonna get a slow volume of spray, as well as you might get some inconsistencies in the actual pattern. You can see the pressure is not high enough. I can't get the paint out of the gun. I've got a inconsistent pattern, and then it actually ended up doing a spit out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna adjust the pressure a little bit higher until I get the pattern that I'd like. It's important to note it can be too low, it can also be too high. You don't wanna put so much paint on there that this surface gets built up and doesn't wanna dry, becomes gummy. There's problems with that as well. So just make sure you take your time, sit your sprayer so that you can do a few passes. You'll play with it and you'll get to know what you like the most with your pump. This is where the reverse comes into play. Clear the line. Looks pretty good to me. Let's go spray this trim. Things to note while you watch me spray this. What I'm doing is I prefer to start my sprayer on a piece of paper or something that's not my surface, and then try and keep it open as long as possible so that I know my spray pattern is consistent. The reason why I do that, as you can see here, in this paint, there's some spits. So what happens when you turn this on, you let off the pressure and start it back up again, sometimes it has a tendency to take paint that's already saved in the tip and shoot it out. So you'll get some larger paint drops over your paint surface that don't look as good when you come through and finish. So if you remember that, try and spray all the way through. Nice, clean, consistent motions. What you'll notice as I go around and I'm spraying my perimeter, and I'm getting all the corners of the hard to reach spots, and then I'm gonna fan over the whole surface with nice even strokes, and it's gonna give a consistent pattern and volume of paint across the whole surface so that it's not too much, it's not too little, it's just right. Okay, so while you're spraying, the other thing that you're gonna notice too is how far and how close you have the gun to the wall. You're gonna practice that on your board before you come inside, but usually between 8 inches and a foot away from the wall, depending on the fan pattern. What we wanna do is just overlap paint. It's also crucial to note, we've got raw material, we've got prime material, we've exposed some MDF when we prepped. So you've got areas that are gonna have different coverage. This is the first coat, this is the primer. It's not the finish coat, remember that. You don't have to keep going over areas with paint until you don't see the color anymore. We're putting this down, we want it to be a quick coat, we want it to dry fast, we can come back through and prep. Then we're gonna spend the time, we're gonna finish any little areas that we missed, put a coat of primer, and we're gonna do 2 coats of paint. So the first coat goes on nice and flat, the second coat makes all the imperfections disappear. All right, so we're all primed. First thing I notice, I do this quite a bit, I can already see a few areas where we may have missed on the prep or could use a little bit more attention to detail. We're gonna go ahead and let this paint dry. We're gonna come back and fix some of the little stuff. We could close this seam up a little bit better. There's a nail hole that got missed. It's inevitable, nobody's perfect on the first round. We got a few nail holes over here, they were hiding in plain sight. So we'll let this dry, we're gonna come back, make sure we pay attention to those areas. We'll spot prime those, and then we're gonna top coat with the finished paint.
2,000 years later.
We're ready to start spraying it with our top coat. So I've loaded my sprayer the same way I showed you. I've got my new trim paint in here. We're using white satin. I'm gonna spray this molding with the first coat of paint. We'll let it dry and then we'll spray another one. So if you'll notice, the first thing that I did is I went through and I sprayed all the hard to reach edges. So I keep a pattern, I do all the inside edges and all the bottom corners. Then I come through and I do all the top and then all the bottom. Now I know that I've got paint in the hard to reach areas. Now I'm just gonna do a quick fan. I'm gonna go over the whole surface with a nice light coat of paint, let that dry, and then I'm gonna repeat the process and we've got a finished product. Now we finished our second coat, the paint's nice and wet. As you can see, we've got good even coverage across our whole surface. All our seams are filled, all our nail holes are puttied, everything's really tight and professional. The next step is gonna be we need to let this paint dry for a little bit. We're gonna pull off the paper and we'll show you our nice sharp crisp line and how this product turned out. All right guys, here it is, we're all done. Pulled off our paper. If you like what you see here, go ahead and like and subscribe in the link below. Any comments that you guys wanna leave us, any tips and tricks, things that you would do different, or you want a little more detail on what we did here, go ahead and comment in the section below and we'll get back to you.